The silence in the first-class cabin of Stratosphere Global Flight 802 was shattered not by turbulence, but by the sharp, sneering voice of Captain Grant Holloway. He wasn't in the cockpit where he belonged. He was standing over seat 1A, looming over a woman who had paid full fare, his gold wings glinting under the cabin lights like a badge of absolute authority. "I don't care what your ticket says." Holloway spat loud enough for the business moguls in row 2 to gasp. "This seat is reserved for priority personnel. You need to move to the back. Now!" He thought he was clearing a seat for his mistress. He didn't realize he was trying to evict the woman who signed his paychecks. What happened next wasn't just a firing. It was a demolition. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, drumming a frantic rhythm against the panoramic windows of the Terminal 4 first-class lounge. But inside the atmosphere was hermetically sealed in luxury, the scent of white tea, old leather, and money. Katarina Bennett sat in a high-backed wing chair near the window, watching the tarmac operations with the sharp, calculating eyes of a hawk. To the casual observer, and there were many in this lounge, she was an enigma. Dressed in a monochromatic slate-grey cashmere tracksuit and pristine white sneakers, she didn't scream old money. She didn't wear the garish logos of Gucci or Balenciaga that the nouveau riche flaunted. Her only jewelry was a simple, thin gold band on her thumb and a vintage Cartier tank watch that was worth more than the average sedan. She took a sip of sparkling water, her eyes tracking the movement of a Boeing 787-10 Dreamliner as it was towed toward Gate A6. The livery was a deep midnight blue with a silver streak down the fuselage. Stratosphere Global. It was her baby, her empire. 20 years ago, Katarina had been a logistics coordinator in a dusty warehouse in Atlanta. Today, she was the majority shareholder and CEO of Stratosphere Global, the world's fastest-growing luxury airline. But today she wasn't Madam CEO. She wasn't Miss Bennett. Today she was just Kat, a passenger in seat 1A, flying from New York to London for a board meeting that nobody knew she was attending in person. She wanted to see the product from the inside. She wanted to see if the billion-dollar refurbishment she'd authorized was actually being implemented, or if middle management was cutting corners. She checked her phone. A text from David Ross, her chief of operations. Boarding starts in 20. Enjoy the flight, boss. Try not to fire anyone before you land. Katarina smirked. David knew her too well. She stood up, grabbing her Toomey carry-on. As she walked toward the gate, she felt the familiar weight of eyes on her. It was a weight she had carried her entire life as a black woman in corporate America. The glances that lingered a second too long. The curiosity that wasn't quite admiration, but rather a question. How did she get in here? At the gate, the chaos of general boarding was already ensuing. The gate agents were shouting instructions that nobody was listening to. Katarina bypassed the long line for economy and slipped into the priority lane. The gate agent, a young man named Tyler, with a messy tie and tired eyes, looked up. He didn't smile. His eyes flicked from her face to her comfortable clothes, then down to her sneakers. "Zone 1, only ma'am," Tyler said, his voice flat. He pointed a thumb toward the chaotic mass of Zone 3. "General boarding is that way?" Katarina didn't flinch. She was used to this. The assumption that she was lost. The assumption that she didn't belong. "I know," she said, her voice smooth like velvet, but hard as iron underneath. She placed her phone on the scanner. The machine let out a cheerful chirp and flashed green. Priority 1. Tyler blinked. He looked at the screen, then back at her. The name on the screen just said, K. Bennett. It didn't flag her as CEO. She had specifically asked it to suppress the VIP alert for this flight to ensure an authentic experience. Oh. Tyler mumbled, his face flushing slightly. Right. Go ahead. No apology. No, have a pleasant flight, Ms. Bennett. Just a wave of the hand. Katerina made a mental note, retraining required for JFK Gate staff. Emphasis on implicit bias. She walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting her face. This was her favorite moment. The transition. The threshold. She stepped onto the plane. The lighting in the cabin was set to a calming, soft violet, her design choice. The air smelled of citrus and basil, her signature cabin scent. Welcome aboard, the lead flight attendant said. Her name tag read Jessica. She was polished, smiling professional. May I see your boarding pass? Katerina showed her screen. Seat 1A. Jessica said, her smile widening. Right this way, Miss Bennett. Can I get you a glass of champagne before takeoff? Sparkling water with a lime, please, Katerina said. She settled into seat 1A. It was a suite, really. Sliding doors, a lie-flat bed, a 32-inch 4K screen. She ran her hand along the stitching of the leather armrest. It was impeccable. Good. The cabin began to fill. Behind her in 1B, a tech CEO was loudly talking on his phone about a merger. Across the aisle in 2A, an older woman with a poodle in a carrier was fussing with a blanket. Katerina put on her noise-cancelling headphones, not turning them on yet, just using them to signal she didn't want to talk. She closed her eyes, ready to endure the 7-hour flight in peace. But peace was not on the manifest today. 10 minutes before the doors were scheduled to close, the atmosphere shifted. The heavy reinforced cockpit door opened, and the pilot emerged. Captain Grant Holloway. Katerina recognized him immediately, though she had never met him face to face. He was one of their senior captains, a man who had come over from a legacy carrier during the merger 5 years ago. He had a reputation, excellent stick and rudder man, perfect safety record, but a prickly personality with management. He was tall, silver-haired, with a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite and an ego to match. He wasn't alone. Standing behind him, looking nervous and out of place in a leopard print coat, was a young woman. She was chewing gum, holding a knockoff Louis Vuitton bag, and looking around the first-class cabin with wide, greedy eyes. Holloway was scanning the cabin. His eyes glossed over the tech CEO. They glossed over the old lady with the poodle. Then they landed on Katerina. He frowned, a deep annoyance-filled furrow of the brow. He leaned down and whispered something to Jessica, the flight attendant. Jessica looked uncomfortable. She shook her head, slightly whispering back. Holloway's face hardened. He gestured aggressively toward seat 1A. Katerina watched this pantomime through half-open eyes. She knew exactly what was happening. She had seen it in boardrooms, in restaurants, and in hotels for 20 years. Holloway turned away from Jessica, dismissing her with a sharp wave of his hand. He adjusted his tie, took a breath that expanded his chest to its full arrogant capacity, and marched toward seat 1A. Katerina didn't move. She waited. Holloway stopped right next to her seat. He didn't bend down to eye level the way service professionals are trained to do. He stood at his full height, forcing her to look up, establishing dominance, before a word was spoken. "Ma'am," Holloway said. His voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that reassured passengers during a storm but terrified junior officers. "I need to see your boarding pass." Katerina slowly slid her headphones off. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I've already shown it to the flight attendant," she said calmly. "And the gate agent." "I'm the captain," Holloway said, tapping the 4 gold stripes on his shoulder. "And I'm asking to see it again. Now." The cabin went quiet. The tech CEO stopped talking. The poodle stopped yapping. Katerina held his gaze. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and unlocked the screen. She held it up. Holloway glanced at it. "Zone 1. Employee travel. Full fare," Katerina corrected him. "Revenue ticket." Holloway let out a short, derisive scoff. He looked back at the woman in the leopard print coat who was waiting near the galley, popping her gum. Then he looked back at Katerina. "There's been a mistake with the manifest," Holloway lied. The lie was so smooth it almost sounded like truth. "Seat 1A is reserved for flight crew rest on this leg. It's a deadhead seat. The system shouldn't have sold it to you." Katerina raised an eyebrow. "This is a 7-hour flight, Captain. Crew rest seats are 4A and 4B, and they are curtained off. Seat 1A is a prime revenue suite. I paid $12,000 for it." Holloway's eyes narrowed. He didn't like being corrected, especially not by a woman, especially not by this woman. "Listen to me." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "I don't care what you paid. I am the commander of this aircraft. My word is law. This seat is broken. The recline mechanism is faulty. Safety protocol dictates I cannot have a passenger in a broken seat." "It was working fine 5 minutes ago," Katerina said, touching the control panel. The seat hummed and adjusted smoothly. Holloway slammed his hand down on the armrest covering the controls. "It is broken," he said, his voice rising. "Because I say it is broken. Now you have 2 choices. You can move to economy comfort seat. 24C is open. Or you can get off my plane." Katerina looked at his hand on her armrest. Then she looked at his face. She saw the bigotry burning behind his eyes, fueled by entitlement. He wanted the seat for the girl, and he had picked the passenger he thought was the least likely to fight back, the one he thought had the least right to be there. "You're making a mistake, Captain," Katerina said softly. "The only mistake," Holloway sneered, straightening up, "was the computer letting you book this seat. Move. Now. Or I'm calling Port Authority to drag you off." The air in the first-class cabin had turned brittle, like dry ice about to shatter. Jessica, the lead flight attendant, stepped forward. Her face was pale. She knew protocol. She knew that even if a seat was broken, which she knew it wasn't. You didn't downgrade a full-fare, first-class passenger to economy. You bumped them to another first-class seat, or you compensated them heavily. You certainly didn't threaten them with arrest. "Captain," Jessica said, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe we can—" "Quiet, Jessica," Holloway snapped without looking at her. His eyes were locked on Katerina. "I'm handling this." He turned back to the woman in the leopard coat, giving her a wink that he thought was subtle. "Tiffany, grab your bag. This lady is just leaving." Tiffany giggled, stepping forward. "Thanks, Grant. You're the best." Katerina didn't move. She didn't unbuckle. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "Captain Holloway," Katerina said, her voice gaining a steely edge. "I want to be very clear about what is happening here. You are attempting to involuntarily downgrade a revenue passenger to facilitate an unauthorized upgrade for a personal acquaintance. This is a violation of FAA Regulations Company Policy, Section 4, Paragraph 2, and frankly, it's a violation of basic human decency." Halloway's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his uniform. He wasn't used to passengers quoting company policy. He was used to passengers being scared of him. "You think you're a lawyer?" Halloway laughed, a cruel barking sound. "You think because you read some terms and conditions, you can lecture me I have flown 30 years. I have flown combat missions. I don't explain myself to people like you." "People like me?" Katerina asked. "Clarify that." "Aggressive passengers," Halloway said quickly, realizing he was skirting a line. "Disruptive passengers who refuse crew instructions." "I haven't refused anything yet," Katerina said. "I'm simply asking for the incident report number for the broken seat before I vacate it. If the seat is broken, you must have logged it in the e-log book. Show me the log entry." Halloway froze. There was no entry. He hadn't logged it because the seat worked perfectly. If he logged it, maintenance would have to come on board, delaying the flight by an hour to inspect it. He was trapped in his own lie. But men like Grant Halloway do not back down when trapped. They double down. "You are interfering with flight operations," Halloway announced, his voice booming so the whole plane could hear. He wanted an audience. He wanted to shame her into submission. "This is a federal offense. I am giving you one last chance. Get up, get your trash, and get to row 24. If you are not out of this seat in 60 seconds, I am clearing the cabin and having you arrested." "For what?" a voice from across the aisle interjected. It was the tech CEO in 1B. He had taken off his headphones. He was a young guy wearing a hoodie, but everyone knew who he was. Marcus Vane, founder of a major cybersecurity firm. "I've been watching," Marcus said, looking at Halloway with disdain. "She hasn't done anything. And that seat works fine. I saw her adjust it." Halloway spun around. "Sir, this does not concern you. Mind your business unless you want to be offloaded too." Marcus blinked. "Are you serious? You're threatening me now." "I am the captain," Halloway roared. The vein in his neck was bulging. "I run this plane. Not you, not her. Me." He turned back to Katerina, his patience incinerated. He reached out and grabbed the strap of her carry-on bag, which was resting on the ottoman. "I said, move!" He yanked the bag. Katerina's hand shot out and grabbed the handle, stopping him. "Do not touch my property. Let go." Halloway pulled harder. "Captain!" Jessica screamed. The bag ripped from Katerina's grip, sending it skidding across the aisle. It hit Tiffany's leg. Tiffany yelped more in surprise than pain. "Assault!" Tiffany screamed, seizing the moment. "She threw her bag at me. She attacked me. Grant, she attacked me." It was a farce, a poorly acted, ridiculous farce, but Halloway seized it like a lifeline. "That's it," Halloway said, pulling his radio from his belt. "Tower, this is Stratosphere 802. We have a violent passenger on board. First-class cabin. Requesting airport police immediately. Assault on a flight crew member's guest." He clicked off the radio and looked down at Katerina with a triumphant, sneering grin. "You're done," he whispered. "You're going to jail, and I'm going to make sure you're on the no-fly list for the rest of your miserable life." Katerina looked at her bag lying in the aisle. She looked at the terrified flight attendants. She looked at Marcus Vane, who was filming everything on his phone now. And then a strange calmness settled over her. The anger evaporated, replaced by the cold, mechanical precision of a CEO preparing to dismantle a failing subsidiary. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. "Fine," Katerina said. She stood up. She smoothed the front of her cashmere tracksuit. "I'll move," she said. Halloway smirked, crossing his arms. "Finally. Smart choice. Row 24. Go." "No," Katerina said. "I'm not going to row 24. If I'm a security threat, surely I shouldn't remain on the plane at all." She stepped into the aisle, picking up her bag. She stood toe-to-toe with Holloway. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she seemed to tower over the cabin. "I will step off the aircraft to speak with the police," she said. "But Captain, I promise you this. This plane is not taking off with you in the cockpit. You have just made the last command decision of your career." Holloway laughed. He actually laughed. "Get off my plane, lady. Enjoy the holding cell." Katerina walked toward the door. As she passed Tiffany, the girl stuck her tongue out. Katerina didn't even blink. She walked up the jet bridge, back into the terminal. Tyler, the gate agent, was standing there with 2 Port Authority police officers. "That's her," Tyler said, pointing. "The captain said she assaulted a passenger." The officers stepped forward, hands near their belts. "Ma'am, stop right there. Put your bag down." Katerina stopped. She put the bag down. "Officer," she said, her voice projecting authority. "My name is Katerina Bennett. I am the CEO and owner of Stratosphere Global Airlines. I would like you to detain Captain Grant Holloway for filing a false police report, and I need to borrow your radio to contact the air marshals." The officers paused. They looked at each other. Then they looked at her tracksuit. They looked at her sneakers. "Yeah, right," the older officer scoffed. "And I'm the King of England. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The karma was coming. But first she had to endure the humiliation of the handcuffs. The holding room at JFK's Terminal 4 wasn't a jail cell exactly. It was a windowless beige box with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. There was a metal table, 3 chairs bolted to the floor, and a one-way mirror that everyone knew was a one-way mirror. The air was stale, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and despair. Katerina sat on one of the cold metal chairs. Her hands were no longer cuffed. They had removed them once she was in the secure room, but the red marks on her wrists were still fading. The physical pain was negligible. The humiliation, however, burned fresh. She had been marched through the terminal like a criminal. People had stared. Some had filmed. She saw the headlines in her head. "Unruly passenger dragged off Stratosphere flight." It would have been a PR nightmare if she were anyone else. But she wasn't anyone else. She was the one holding the match, and the gasoline was waiting back on the tarmac. The door opened with a heavy clank. The older officer who had handcuffed her walked in. His name badge read, Officer Miller. He looked tired, annoyed, and completely uninterested in hearing excuses. He was holding a clipboard. "All right, Ms. Bennett," Miller said, using air quotes around her name that dripped with sarcasm. "We got the statement from the captain. He says you physically assaulted his guest through luggage and refused crew instructions. That's federal assault and interference with a flight crew. You're looking at serious time. We're talking federal charges placement on the no-fly list and a fine that's going to hurt." Katerina sat perfectly still, her posture regal despite the setting. "I want to make a phone call." "You can make a call when we process you at the precinct," Miller said, turning to leave. "Right now you sit and wait for transport." "Officer Miller," Katerina said. She didn't shout, but her voice stopped him cold. It was the voice she used to close billion-dollar mergers. "You have my ID. You have my wallet. Did you look at them?" Miller paused, his hand on the doorknob. He had thrown her bag in a locker without looking. "We'll inventory it later." "Go look at the Black American Express card in my wallet," she said, her eyes boring into his back. "The Centurion. Look at the name. Then pull out your phone and Google Stratosphere Global CEO. If I am who I say I am, and you transport me to a precinct based on the lies of a pilot I am about to fire, you will be named in the civil suit alongside Captain Halloway. And, officer, I have the best lawyers in New York on retainer." Miller rolled his eyes, but he hesitated. There was something about her. The tracksuit was expensive cashmere, not cotton. The watch, he had noticed the watch when he cuffed her. It wasn't a fake. And her calm. Criminals usually yelled or cried. She was just waiting. "Fine," Miller grunted. "Sit tight. Don't move." He left. The lock clicked. Katerina closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She needed to be calm. She needed David Ross. She needed to ensure that Halloway didn't just lose his job, but that he understood exactly who he had crossed. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The buzzing of the lights seemed to get louder. Suddenly the door flew open. It wasn't Miller. It was a man in a suit sweating profusely. It was Lieutenant Davidson, the airport precinct commander. Behind him was Officer Miller, looking pale and holding Katerina's wallet as if it were made of radioactive glass. "Miss Bennett," Davidson said, breathless. I am so terribly sorry. There has been a massive misunderstanding." He rushed forward to unbolt the table, realizing it wasn't bolted just heavy. He pulled a chair out for himself, but didn't sit. He stood wringing his hands. "Officer Miller didn't realize. He didn't check the... Please accept my deepest apologies. We have reviewed the security footage from the gate. It appears your story checks out." Katerina stood up slowly. She took her wallet from Miller's trembling hand. She didn't check it. She just slid it into her pocket. "Lieutenant," she said, "I'm not interested in apologies right now. I have a plane to catch, specifically Flight 802 to London." The plane is still at the gate, ma'am," Davidson said, eager to please. "They were offloading your luggage. It caused a delay. They missed their takeoff slot." "Good," Katerina said. "I need my phone, and I need you to escort me back to the aircraft. I have a staffing change to make." Davidson nodded vigorously. "Of course. Right this way. Miller, carry her bag." Miller grabbed the Toomey bag like a dutiful servant. They marched out of the holding room back into the terminal. But this time the dynamic was different. The police weren't her captors. They were her honor guard. As they walked through the terminal, Katerina dialed a number. "David," she said when the line picked up. "Kat, where are you?" "The app shows you offloaded. What's going on? Are you okay?" David Ross's voice was frantic. "I'm at the airport," she said, walking briskly past a stunned TSA agent. "I need you to patch into the Flight 802 comms, and I need you to authorize an immediate crew replacement for the captain. Get Chief Pilot Henderson on the line. I know he's on reserve in New York today." "What? Why, what did Halloway do?" "He tried to steal my seat for his girlfriend," Katerina said, her voice dropping to absolute zero. "And then he had me arrested." There was a silence on the other end. A long, terrified silence. He had you arrested," David whispered. "Oh my God. He's a dead man. He is a walking corpse." "Meet me at gate A6, Katerina said, "and bring the termination paperwork. I want it hard copy. I want him to sign it." Back on Flight 802, the mood was toxic. The plane had missed its slot. Passengers were grumbling, checking their watches, and demanding answers. The air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the rising body heat and temper of 300 people. Captain Halloway was in the cockpit, feeling invincible. He had won. He had kicked off the trouble-gotten Tiffany the seat and asserted his dominance. He was sipping coffee, chatting with the first officer, a young guy named Evans, who looked sick to his stomach. "Don't worry about it, kid," Holloway said, slapping Evans on the shoulder. "You gotta show them who's boss. She was a troublemaker, probably on drugs. We did the right thing. Safety first." Evans stared at the instruments, his hands gripping the yoke too tight. "Captain," she said. She said she owned the airline. What if— Holloway laughed so hard he spilled a drop of coffee on his pants. "Yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny. They all say stuff like that. Do you know who I am? Classic narcissism. Crazy people, forget her. Focus on the flight." Just then a commotion started in the jet bridge. Holloway frowned. He leaned out of the cockpit window, but couldn't see anything. He opened the cockpit door and looked into the cabin. Tiffany was sprawled in seat 1A, taking selfies with a glass of champagne. She had her shoes off her feet, resting on the bulkhead. "Grant, babe, when do we take off? My followers are waiting. I need to post this." "Soon, doll," Holloway said, winking. "Just waiting for a new slot time. ATC is backing us up." Then he saw Tyler, the gate agent, backing down the aisle. Tyler looked like he had seen a ghost. He was shaking his head, mouthing, "I'm sorry." And then she walked in. Katarina Bennett. She wasn't in handcuffs. She was flanked by the police lieutenant and 2 other officers. But more importantly, she was followed by a tall man in a sharp navy suit, David Ross, the COO of Stratosphere Global. Holloway's smile faltered. Why was the COO, here David Ross, never came to the gates unless there was a crash? Katarina walked straight to seat 1A. She looked at Tiffany. "Get out," Katarina said. Tiffany laughed, barely looking up from her phone. "Excuse me, Grant. She's back. Tell her to go away." Holloway stormed out of the cockpit, his face flushing red. "What is the meaning of this, officer? I told you to arrest this woman. She is a threat to flight safety. I want her removed immediately." Lieutenant Davidson stepped forward, blocking Holloway's path. "Captain Holloway, stand down." "Stand down, I'm the captain," Holloway shouted, spit flying from his mouth. He looked at David Ross. "Mr. Ross, thank God you're here. This woman is a lunatic. She assaulted this passenger and—" "Shut up, Grant," David Ross said. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room instantly. It was the voice of the boardroom. Holloway froze. "Excuse me." David Ross stepped aside, revealing Katarina. "Captain Holloway," David said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I don't think you've been properly introduced. You seem to be under the impression this is just a passenger. This is Katarina Bennett, the majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Stratosphere Global. She signs your checks. She owns this plane. She owns the fuel in the wings. She owns the uniform on your back." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. You could hear the hum of the auxiliary power unit. Holloway's face went slack. The blood drained from his skin so fast he looked like a wax figure. He looked at Katarina. He looked at the seat. He looked at Tiffany. His brain tried to process the information, but it kept hitting a wall. "The CEO," he stammered. No, that's... She was in sneakers. She's black." The cabin gasped. Marcus Vane, still recording, whispered "wow" into his phone. "I like to travel comfortably," Katarina said, her voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. "And my race has nothing to do with my bank account, Captain. Unlike your guest whom you upgraded against federal regulation." Katarina turned to Tiffany. "I said get out of my seat and get off my plane." Tiffany looked at Holloway for help, her eyes wide. "Grant, is she serious?" Holloway couldn't speak. His world was collapsing. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Miss Lieutenant Davidson said to Tiffany, "You need to grab your things and vacate the aircraft. You are trespassing on private property." Tiffany grabbed her fake Louis Vuitton bag, scrambling out of the seat. She glared at Holloway. "You said you ran this place. You loser. You said you were the boss." She stormed off the plane, pushing past the officers. Now it was just Holloway and Katerina. Katerina stepped closer to him. She didn't need to shout. The entire first-class cabin was leaning in, listening. "You accused me of assault," Katerina said. "You filed a false police report. You abused your authority to steal from this company. You humiliated a paying customer." "Miss Bennett," Holloway croaked. He tried to smile, a grotesque, twitching expression. I had no idea. It was a mistake. I was just trying to ensure safety. I thought, you see, sometimes we get unruly." "You thought I was nobody," Katerina said. "You thought you could bully me because of how I look, because I didn't fit your image of power." She held out her hand. David Ross placed a folder in it. "Grant Holloway," Katerina said, opening the folder. "This is your termination notice, effective immediately, for cause: gross misconduct, fraud, and violation of federal aviation statutes." Holloway stared at the paper. You can't do this. I have a union. I have rights. I'll sue you." "I've been here 5 years. You can try," Katerina said calmly. "But first you have to get off my property." She looked at the police lieutenant. "Lieutenant, I believe this man just admitted to filing a false police report earlier. I'd like to press charges." "Wait!" Holloway screamed as the officers moved toward him. "You can't arrest me. I'm a captain. I have to fly this plane. You can't fly this without me." "Not anymore," a new voice boomed. A man with grey hair and a kindly face stepped onto the plane, carrying a flight bag. It was Chief Pilot Henderson. "I'll take the stick from here, Grant," Henderson said coldly. "Give me your badge." Holloway looked at his mentor. "Chief, please, talk to her." "Badge," Henderson repeated. "Now!" With trembling hands, Holloway unpinned his gold wings. He handed them to Katerina. She looked at the wings in her hand. Then she looked at Holloway. "Escort him off," she said. The police grabbed Holloway by the arms. He wasn't marching proudly anymore. He was slumped, broken, dragging his feet as they hauled him up the aisle. As he passed row 1, Marcus Vane started a slow clap. The old lady with the poodle joined in. Then the whole first-class cabin. Then economy, as word spread back. The applause followed Grant Holloway all the way up the jet bridge. Katerina watched him go. She didn't smile. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She turned to David Ross. "I'm going to need a stiff drink now, not water." "Champagne is on its way," David said. "I'll handle the police report. Go to London. Fix the European division." Katerina sat back down in seat 1A, the seat she owned. She looked at the flight attendant, Jessica, who was still shaking near the galley. "Jessica," Katerina said gently. Yes, Miss Bennett. You did good today. You tried to stop him. I saw that." Katerina smiled. "Take a breath. We have a flight to catch." Jessica let out a long breath, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, ma'am." "Now," Katerina said, buckling her belt. "Let's get this bird in the air." But the drama wasn't over. Holloway wasn't the type to go down quietly, and the video Marcus Vane had recorded. It was about to hit the internet, and the fallout was going to be nuclear. The flight to London was smooth, But down on the ground, the world was turbulent. By the time Stratosphere Global Flight 802 touched down at Heathrow, Marcus Vane's video had been viewed 45 million times. The title was simple: Pilot tries to kick black woman off plane. Finds out she owns the airline. It was the perfect storm of viral content. It had a villain, Holloway, a hero. Katerina, a damsel in distress who was actually a dragon, also Katerina, and a bratty sidekick, Tiffany. The internet devoured it. Katerina turned on her phone as the plane taxied. It nearly vibrated out of her hand. Thousands of notifications. "You're trending," David Ross texted. "#1 on Twitter, #1 on YouTube. Even the BBC is asking for a comment." Katerina sighed. She hated the spotlight. She preferred to operate in the shadows, moving chess pieces, while others took the credit. But she knew that in business, you define the narrative, or the narrative defines you. "Set up a press conference at the London HQ," she texted back, "and get the legal team ready. Holloway isn't going to go quietly." She was right. Grant Holloway was currently sitting in a hotel bar near JFK, downing his 4th scotch. He wasn't in jail. His union rep had managed to get him released on his own recognizance pending the assault charges, but his life was over. Or so he thought. Then his phone rang. It was a producer from the Patriot Hour, a cable news show known for its aggressive, controversial takes. "Captain Holloway," the producer said. "We saw the video. It looks like a classic case of a DEI hire trying to humiliate a veteran pilot. We want to hear your side. We can have you on air tonight." Holloway sat up. The alcohol fueled his delusion. Yes, he thought. "I'm the victim here. She set me up. She baited me." "I'll do it," Holloway slurred. That night, while Katerina was briefing her London executives, Holloway was on national television. He looked ragged, but he spun a tale of woe. He claimed Katerina had been belligerent and threatening before the camera started rolling. He claimed he didn't know who she was and was just following safety protocols regarding a faulty seat sensor. He painted himself as a working-class hero crushed by a woke billionaire tyrant. "She ruined my career because I didn't bow down to her," Holloway told the host, wiping away a fake tear. "I served this country. I flew for 30 years, and she fired me for trying to keep my passengers safe." A segment of the internet rallied behind him. A GoFundMe for Holloway's legal defense appeared, raising $50,000 in hours. Comments flooded Katerina's social media tyrant. "Respect our pilots." Katerina watched the interview from her hotel suite in Mayfair. Her jaw tightened. "He's lying," David Ross said, pacing the room. "He's doubling down on the lie." "Let him," Katerina said coldly. "He's digging his own grave. He claims the seat sensor was faulty. He claims I was belligerent." She picked up the phone. "Get the maintenance logs from the aircraft, and get the unedited security footage from the gate, specifically the audio feed from the podium. Oh, and David, release the cockpit voice recorder audio from the moment he walked into the cabin. The ambient mic picks up everything in row 1. You want to leak CVR audio, the NTSB won't like that." "I own the data," Katerina said, "and this is a matter of company reputation. Leak it." 2 hours later, Stratosphere Global's official account posted a single link. No caption. Just a link to a sound file. The world listened. They heard Holloway's sneering voice. They heard him say, "I don't care what you paid." They heard him say, "I'm clearing the cabin." They heard Tiffany giggling about the upgrade. They heard Katerina's calm, polite responses. And most damning of all, they heard Holloway whisper to his first officer before leaving the cockpit, Watch me toss this nobody in 1A. Tiffany wants the window. The faulty sensor, lie evaporated instantly. The belligerent passenger, lie crumbled. The GoFundMe was paused for fraudulent activity. The Patriot Hour deleted the interview from their website. Holloway wasn't a martyr anymore. He was just a liar. And now the real punishment began. The legal proceedings took 6 months. They were brutal, efficient, and entirely one-sided. Katerina didn't just fire Holloway. She sued him for breach of contract defamation and damages caused by the flight delay. Stratosphere Global's lawyers were sharks who smelled blood. They deposed Tiffany first. Under oath and terrified of perjury charges, Tiffany cracked immediately. She admitted Holloway had promised her the seat days in advance. She admitted there was nothing wrong with the seat. She admitted she had lied about Katerina throwing the bag. Then came the divorce. Holloway's wife, a woman who had endured his arrogance for 20 years, saw the video of him trying to impress his mistress. She filed for divorce the next day, taking the house, the car, and half of his pension, which was now in jeopardy. But the hardest hit came in the courtroom during the civil suit. Holloway sat at the defense table wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit. He looked 10 years older. His silver hair was thinning. His face was gaunt. Katerina took the stand. She didn't look at him. She answered the questions with surgical precision. "Ms. Bennett," Holloway's lawyer asked, trying to find a wedge, "isn't it true that you could have simply identified yourself as the CEO immediately? You laid a trap for my client." Katerina turned to the jury. "I did not lay a trap. I presented a ticket, a valid revenue ticket. It shouldn't matter if I am the CEO or a school teacher. If I had been a white man in a suit, Captain Holloway never would have questioned my right to be in that seat. He saw a black woman in sneakers, and he assumed he could discard me. I didn't fire him because he didn't recognize me. I fired him because I saw exactly who he was." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict: Holloway was liable for $2.4 million in damages to the airline for the delay and reputational harm. Since he couldn't pay, his assets were seized. His boat, his remaining savings, everything. The FAA revoked his ATP certificate, airline transport pilot license, citing moral turpitude and filing false federal reports. He was grounded for life. After the verdict was read, Holloway approached Katerina in the hallway outside the courtroom. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic pleading. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice trembling, "please, I have nothing. I can't fly. I can't pay this judgment. I'm living in a studio apartment in Queens. You've made your point. Can't we settle this?" Katerina stopped. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since that day on the plane. She saw a broken man. "You made a choice, Grant," she said softly. "You had 1,000 chances to stop. You could have checked the manifest. You could have listened to the flight attendant. You could have listened to me. You could have just been kind." "I know," he wept. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I accept your apology," Katerina said. Holloway looked up, hope sparking in his eyes. "So, you'll forgive the debt?" Katerina's expression didn't change. "I accept your apology as a human being, but as a CEO, no. You cost my shareholders money. You damaged my brand. The debt stands." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. 12 months had passed since the incident on Flight 802, and the ecosystem of Stratosphere Global had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't just a policy change, it was a cultural exorcism. The Holloway incident, as it was quietly referred to in the break rooms, had become a cautionary legend, a ghost story told to new hires during orientation. Treat every passenger like a king, because one of them might be the Queen. But for Katarina Bennett, the victory wasn't in the fear her employees felt. It was in the opportunity she had created from the wreckage. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in October at JFK Terminal 4. The terminal was humming with the frantic electric energy of global travel. But at Gate A6, the very gate where Grant Holloway had once tried to have her arrested, the atmosphere was reverent. A stage had been erected, draped in the midnight blue and silver colors of the airline. A large banner hung overhead. The Future of Flight Initiative. Katarina stood at the podium, the bright lights of the press pool warming her face. She looked out at the audience. In the front rows sat 30 young men and women. They were black, Hispanic, Asian, white, male, female. They wore ill-fitting suits and nervous smiles. They were the first class of the Bennett Holloway Scholars. Katarina had insisted on keeping Holloway's name on the legal paperwork for the fund, a final biting irony. His seized assets were paying for the very diversity he had despised. A year ago. Katarina began, her voice echoing clearly through the PA system, cutting through the background noise of the terminal. I sat in a seat right there. She pointed to the jet bridge behind her. And I was told that I didn't fit the profile of success. I was told that my presence in the front of the plane was a glitch in the system. She paused, making eye contact with a young girl in the front row who was clutching a flight handbook like a holy text. That day, a man tried to clip my wings because he couldn't imagine me in the sky. Katarina continued. Today, we are using the resources recovered from that injustice to ensure that imagination is no longer a barrier. You are here because you... The talent. You have the dream, and starting today, you have the means. The sky is not a private club. It is an open expanse, and it belongs to you. The applause that followed was thunderous. It wasn't the polite clapping of a board meeting. It was the raw, emotional applause of parents watching their children's lives change in real time. Katarina smiled, but her eyes remained vigilant. She shook hands, signed model airplanes, and took photos. She was the gracious host, the benevolent CEO. But as the event wound down and the press crews began packing up their tripods, the adrenaline faded, leaving Katarina feeling a sudden need for quiet. David, she said to her COO, who was busy charming a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, I'm going to take a walk. Meet me at the lounge in 20 minutes. Security detail, David asked, instantly alert. No, Katarina said, adjusting the cuff of her cream-colored blazer. I'm just walking to the other end of the concourse. I need to stretch my legs before the London flight. I want to see the terminal without the entourage. David hesitated, then nodded. 20 minutes. Don't fire anyone while I'm gone. Katarina chuckled softly and turned away from the crowd. She walked through the concourse, her sneakers, she still wore them, a silent nod to that day, squeaking faintly on the polished terrazzo floor. She observed the operation. She saw gate agents smiling. She saw pilots treating the cleaning staff with respect. The fear had faded, replaced by a professional courtesy that made the airline run smoother than ever. She passed the duty-free shops, the overpriced steakhouses, the chaotic security checkpoints. She felt invisible again, but this time it was a choice. She enjoyed the anonymity. As she rounded the corner near the entrance to Concourse B, the foot traffic thinned out. This was the older section of the terminal, still awaiting the renovation crews. The lighting was harsher here, the carpet a bit more worn. Ahead of her, near the entrance to the men's restroom, a "Caution Wet Floor" sign was set up like a yellow tombstone. A man was working a heavy industrial floor buffer. The machine droned with a low, hypnotic hum, whir, whir, whir. He was wrestling with it, his body tense as he tried to guide the heavy disc across a stubborn scuff mark. He wore a grey jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, stained with chemical cleaner. A navy blue cap was pulled low over his eyes, hiding his face in shadow. He looked exhausted, the posture of a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. Katerina slowed her pace. She didn't know why, but the rhythm of the buffer caught her attention. It was a lonely sound. The man stopped the machine to wipe sweat from his brow with a rag that hung from his belt. He coughed a dry, hacking sound and looked up to check the clock on the wall. The fluorescent light hit his face. Katerina stopped dead in her tracks. The face was gaunt. The skin was grayish, lacking the sun-kissed tan of a man who spent his life above the clouds. Deep lines were etched around his mouth, lines of bitterness and regret. His silver hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and messy under the cheap cap. It was Grant Holloway. The man who had commanded a $200 million aircraft was now commanding a floor buffer. The man who had worn gold stripes on his shoulders now wore a name tag that simply said, Grant, Facilities. He hadn't seen her yet. He was staring at the clock, counting the minutes until his shift ended, until he could go back to whatever small, dim life he now inhabited. He looked defeated. Not just fired, but hollowed out. The arrogance that had fueled him was gone, burned away by the friction of reality. Katerina felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't pity exactly. Pity implies you feel sorry for someone's misfortune. This was something colder. It was the recognition of balance. The universe, usually so chaotic, had snapped into perfect alignment. She took a step forward. The sound of her sneaker scuffing the floor made him look down. His eyes traveled up from her shoes. He saw the white sneakers. He froze. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, his gaze moved up to her face. For a moment, the terminal noise seemed to vanish. No announcements, no rolling suitcases, no chatter. Just the hum of the idling floor buffer and the silence between 2 people who knew each other's souls. Holloway's eyes widened. A flash of panic crossed his face, the instinct to run, to hide, to deny. He gripped the handle of the buffer so hard, his knuckles turned white. He opened his mouth as if to speak, perhaps to beg, perhaps to apologize again, perhaps to scream. But no sound came out. The shame was a physical gag. He saw the woman he had tried to crush. She was glowing, radiant, powerful, standing tall in her own terminal. And he was standing in a puddle of soapy water, holding a mop. He lowered his head. He physically shrank his shoulders, collapsing inward. He pulled the cap down tighter, turning his face away, silently praying that if he didn't look at her, she wouldn't be real. Katerina watched him. She had the power to destroy him all over again. She could walk over and say, "Missed a spot." She could call security and have him moved for making her uncomfortable. She could snap a photo and post it, ending him socially forever. But Katerina Bennett didn't play with her food. She realized that speaking to him would validate him. It would suggest that he still mattered enough to warrant her words. And the truth was, he didn't. He was just a ghost in the machine she owned. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the terminal jet fuel, coffee, and possibility. She looked at Holloway one last time. Not with anger, but with a final dismissive indifference. She turned her head forward, chin up, and walked past him. She walked right through the wet floor zone. Her sneakers squeaked on the damp tile. Holloway flinched at the sound, but he didn't look up. He waited until her footsteps faded away before he turned to the buffer back on. Whirr. The sound of his new life. Katerina reached the end of the concourse and found David waiting by the lounge entrance. He was checking his watch. "You're back," David said. "Everything okay? You look intense?" "I'm fine," Katerina said, her voice steady and clear. "Actually, I'm better than fine." "Good." David handed her a boarding pass. "We're boarding in 10. Seat 1A, as always. The captain is already doing pre-flight checks. It's Captain Henderson today. He wanted to know if you needed anything special." Katerina took the boarding pass. She looked at the gate number. Gate A6. The circle was closed. "Tell Captain Henderson I don't need anything special," Katerina said, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. "Just a safe flight, and maybe tell him to give the ground crew a wave. They work hard down there." "Will do," David said, looking at her curiously. "Ready to go?" "Ready," she said. Katerina Bennett walked down the jet bridge, leaving the ground behind. She stepped onto the plane, greeted the flight attendants by name, and settled into Seat 1A. She adjusted the recline, stared out the window at the sprawling concrete world below, and watched the ants scurrying around the tarmac. Somewhere down there, a man was buffering a floor. But up here the sky was wide open, endless, and finally, truly hers. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a year, she fully relaxed. The seat was perfectly comfortable, and that is how a single act of arrogance brought down a captain and elevated a queen. It's a brutal reminder that you never know who you are talking to. The person you try to push down today might be the one signing your paycheck or your termination letter tomorrow. Katerina Bennett didn't just reclaim her seat. She reclaimed the dignity of every person who has ever been judged by their appearance. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to treat everyone with respect. What would you have done if you were Katerina? Would you have forgiven the debt? Let me know in the comments below.